Hi, everyone. Wanted to welcome you to today's webinar. This is webinar number 4 in our Stay Connected weekly webinar series here at Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Anthony, and I manage the webinar program. And definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us for today's topic, Learnings from Aruba's Virtual Call Center. I know there are many webinars that you probably have signed up for or are being asked to sign up for, so we do appreciate you joining ours today. We kicked this off 3 weeks ago, this Stay Connected webinar series, with how a network, specifically your network, can deliver business continuity to you and your employees during a very difficult time. And over the last 2 weeks, we've discussed how healthcare and education and K-12 are adapting to meet some of these new challenges. So we're excited to be with you today. We're joined by Patrick Laporte, Senior Director of Portfolio Marketing here at Aruba, and a couple of special guests that I will allow Patrick to introduce to you in just a bit. We'll look at the challenges facing call centers, but also get a little more technical at spots toward the end of the webinar. Some housekeeping. If you're new to Bright Talk, this is our webinar platform. I did want to let you know that there's a spot where you can ask questions directly under the screen that shows the slides. So please ask questions from now until we get to the Q&A at the end of the presentation. We will take those questions in the order in which we receive them, and we'll attempt to answer all of them here live during the webinar. For those we can't answer, we'll reach out to you directly at the email address you used to register for today's webinar. There's also a portion where you can give feedback. That's also in the console for Bright Talk. Over the course of 2.5 years, we've taken many different kinds of feedback, nearly all of it constructive, and we've modified the webinar program based on that feedback. So it won't be a full 60 minutes. We've been told, hey, 35, 40 minutes is usually good, and then get to the Q&A, so we're going to try and stick to that today. And then at the end, we'll kind of recap after the Q&A, thank everybody, and then get you back out there to your business. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce Patrick Laporte, Senior Director for Aruba Portfolio Marketing. And Patrick's going to get us started with Aruba Virtual Call Center. And Patrick is not new to our webinar series, so thanks joining again.
Hey, thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm super excited to be talking to you about some great content that we've got to help you deal with your business continuity challenges, especially as they relate to your virtual call centers as well as workplace planning. As Anthony said, my name is Patrick Laporte. I'm the Senior Director for Portfolio Marketing here at Aruba. And first of all, before I get started, I just want to say that I hope everyone is staying safe out there and that you're all doing what you can to maintain your social distancing. A quick little story of myself. I began work from home about 4 to 5 weeks ago, and I'm not sure if you've all had the same experience as I have. I've noticed when we've started our conference calls, and everybody starts with a little bit of small talk before the meeting actually starts. When we first started sheltering in place, everyone always started the meetings with similar questions, such as, how are you feeling? Are you staying healthy? How's it going? Those kinds of things. But I've noticed a transition in the last couple weeks where now people are asking questions such as, are you getting along with your family still? How's the war going with your refrigerator? And so those are the kinds of questions that we're all, I think, starting to evolve towards as we all deal with these new challenges. And for me, my family, I'm getting along great with, but the refrigerator part, it's a daily battle for me. So hopefully your results are better than what I'm having. But enough about me and the small talk. Today, session is all for you. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a great agenda for today, and I'm super excited to be able to walk through it with you. First, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about how our new normal is presenting new challenges for all of us. And then I'm going to get into sharing some learnings from Aruba's call center, as well as what we're doing around workplace planning. Now, I've always been a proponent of peer-based learning. So in order to do this, I've got some great Aruba speakers here, and both of them are facing similar challenges to what you're facing, such as the fact that they had to quickly transition their entire teams to a work-from-home model. They also had to look at how technology can help them and their teams to remain productive. And then lastly, they're both starting to look at what's next. You know, as we deal with business continuity challenges, we also need to start thinking about, you know, what's coming down the pike. Then I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of Aruba technologies that we're using internally to help our workers stay productive while working from home. And then I'll have each of our speakers provide their top considerations for success. And then to kind of close things out, we'll get into a little bit of Q&A. But I want to tell everybody, encourage you, please stay on the line, because one of the things I'm going to do as part of the Q&A is I'm going to ask each of our speakers, you know, what went well for you? What surprised you? What advice would you have for people in a similar situation as you? And so that's our agenda for today. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the actual content is that we're going to have two polls that we're going to initiate throughout the presentation. And I encourage you to participate in these polls, because not only do they help us to understand how to tailor our content to meet your needs, but also I find that they're very informational for other people on the call. So please, as the polls come up, please participate. So let's go ahead and get into this. You know, we're in a new normal. This pandemic that we're all dealing with has changed everything. It's changed our businesses, it's changed our lifestyle, and it's certainly changed how we work. You know, I don't know about you, but 4 to 5 weeks ago, when we first started dealing with this, I just figured it would be a brief little blip. Maybe we'd all shelter in place for a couple weeks and everything would go back to normal. But it's clear now that this is much more than that. Now, the good news is that it appears that social distancing is helping and that infection curves are flattening. But the thing is that we're not quite out of the woods yet. So everybody stay diligent, stay focused, and we'll get through this. And hopefully, in what we're going to go through today, it will help you and your own businesses to work your way through this. But the thing is that if you're like a lot of other organizations, if you're like us, you're basically starting to deal with two different fronts. You're dealing with the business continuity challenges today, but you're also looking at what does next look like? What's the post-recovery look like? And you're probably starting to think about how to deal with that. Now, in terms of today, you know, it's all about trying to maintain some level of business continuity, and we're all doing the best we can, and I think that's fantastic. But at the same time, you know, with so many businesses that were forced to close, a phone call has become the only way for businesses to provide that direct voice communication with their employees or their customers or their clients. And the thing is businesses with call centers are doubly challenged in this situation, because customers, clients, employees, they're not sure what's going on. They have questions that need answers. And so the call volume of call centers is going to go way up. Demand for answers is going to go way up. But at the same time, a lot of us have been forced to shelter in place, to work from home. And so call center staff are all geographically dispersed. They're all working from home. And so, you know, how do you maintain that high caller satisfaction when these call volumes are at their highest and your call center staff are geographically dispersed to support social distancing? So at Aruba, you know, our situation is really no different than what the rest of you are dealing with. You know, we're trying to do things with our networks to support these unique and rapidly changing conditions. And so what I've done is I've asked Jim Freeman, who's our North America Sales Director, to join us on the call today, and he's going to share how he and his team went through the process of going from an in-office call center to a virtual call center in 8 days. And he's going to go through and exchange and share, you know, the things that they thought about, the things that they did, and basically share all his learnings. But at Aruba, we're also thinking about what does post-recovery look like? what might it look like? Because I say might is because none of us really know. We're still very deep into this social distancing and only now starting to think about how to come out of it. And what does that really look like? So what we do know is that it will absolutely be different, and it'll be different for a while. Safety obviously will still be a top priority. So things like where you were working in an office that was highly dense, high density, or a call center that was high density, those are going to have to change to some extent and be able to adapt. So how will we interact with things like our workplace, our building, and our surroundings? A lot of us have to sign in, enter a passcode or whatever to enter certain parts of our buildings. A lot of that requires physical touch. So how do we make changes and deal with those kinds of conditions? And then lastly, how do businesses, basically they need to be flexible as we all learn and evolve to this new normal. And we'll all need technology that's flexible and able to adapt to these changing conditions. So to give you an idea of our post-recovery thinking here at Aruba, I've asked Chris Hilsenbeck to be joining us. And he's going to speak to how he and his team have been looking at workplace innovations to deal with today's challenges, as well as planning for what post-recovery looks like. And Chris and I have had a number of chances to speak directly, and he's got some pretty interesting stories to tell. So I'm anxious to hear Chris's views. So I think that it's obvious that this is our new normal, and that this new normal presents new challenges for every single one of us. Now, the good news is that at the heart, we're all technologists, and we love challenges. So let's think about how Aruba and Aruba Solutions can help us all deal with these new challenges. So as I mentioned, I've got two great speakers today, and the first one that's going to talk to us is Jim Freeman. Jim is the North American Sales Director for Aruba, and he's going to describe the makeup of his team, as well as walk through the process that he went through to transition from an in-office team to a work-from-home virtual call center team. And then we'll turn it over to Chris, and he's the Director of IT Innovation for Aruba. So him and his team are tasked with what sort of innovations and technologies does Aruba need to help deal with the challenges of the new normal. But before we get started into all of that, I want to do our first poll. And this first poll is all about what type of call center you are supporting. And if I could ask the moderator to see if they could help me to push this poll live, because right now I don't see a button to push this out to the audience.
All right.
Anthony.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. What type of call center are you supporting? Naomi, are you on?
I am. I'll do it now.
Are you able to put? Are you able to push the poll?
Yep, it should be live.
Yep. I see it. Thank you.
Are you seeing it? Okay.
Yep.
Not seeing it on my screen, but that's okay. Okay, so thanks. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Naomi, for the help. So everybody, really, if you can, try and participate in this poll, and it'll help not only us to understand where your focus is, but also to help the audience and your peers to understand where everybody is spending most of their time. And I can see the results are coming in. Looks really good. Most of you are focused on help desk, a little bit of sales center, a little bit of customer service, and many of you who are dealing with all of the above. That's no surprise there. Many of you are focused on network operations holistically, and so it makes sense that, and you're running businesses that have multiple types of call centers, so that makes sense. And then 32% of you, so the majority of you, or a large percentage of you, none of the above, and that's fine. That's also good to know. So let's go ahead and get back to the content, and with that, I want to turn it back over to Jim Freeman, and he's going to walk us through the challenges and solutions that he came up with as he transitions his team into a virtual call center. Jim?
Good morning. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate the opportunity. I think we've got 125, 130 people on with us this morning, and appreciate Anthony and Chris and Patrick's time today. Let me roll into the content here with you, just to give you sort of a framework or a scope or a scale for this. So I have the North American Inside Sales and Business Development Call Center, headquartered out of Portland. So the sales and sales development team is about 85 people. And then with the additional 6 departments and a total of about 15 different teams, the call center runs about 150 people out of that office altogether. We are predominantly focused on outbound sales and business development, inside sales, so that would be account management, and then on the rest of the sales side, it's inbound lead conversion, outbound demand generation. We also have channel account management, sales and channel operations, some human resources folks, about 25 software developers. We cover 5 time zones with an average of a 12 or 13-hour day across the 3 shifts. So easily making 3,300 outbound calls per day and taking another 1,000 plus inbound calls per day. So that's really the setup for what we had to go figure out very quickly as we decided we were going to try to virtualize and run this business with all work from home and employees remotely. So we sat down very quickly and decided that we would need to take a technology-focused but business-driven approach to look at really 3 large groups: systems, applications, and networking. In the systems category, obviously, it's all the client end-user-based technology, laptops, docking stations, keyboard and mice, monitors, headsets, you name it, anything that typically would need to go home with the employee or that they carried back and forth with them every day while we were on-prem or in the office, but the stuff that would leave the building and go home with them. Then we sat down and started tallying up the applications that we used every day or every week in quantity across the group so that we would know really what to expect from connectivity, performance, security, really take into account what we were trying to do. So those applications basically were CRM, our enterprise telephony solution, in addition to the standard Office 365, our account engagement tools, our prospecting engine, our intent engine, and any number of other tools that were application-based. And then on the networking side, we had to figure out both wired and wireless connectivity, take into account residential ISPs, factor in security, whether that was going to be hardware-based, software-based, or a combination of the two, and then routing from the client all the way out to the cloud and back so that we could manage, measure, report, and track. So those are really the key 3, business-driven technology stacks that we went in. Then we had to come up with a methodology. Again, very quickly, we were pressed for time to do this, obviously, given that we'd had employees who'd work from home, 1 day out of a month, maybe every once in a while, but certainly not the whole entire organization 24/7. So we started out with a very small pilot, went with a control group of 5 users that were spread out across 3 different teams to get a variety of, touch all those applications and get a good feel for the performance. We checked network connectivity. We made sure that we could access all the applications. We tested security options, flavors, descriptions, and as well as made sure that we understood how we were going to get IT support if we had problems. That really, through that phase, we met twice a day. We kicked off the first day of planning for the pilot, and then we met every 4 hours, twice a day throughout the day until we were done and out of the office 100%. So in the first handful of meetings, we really brought in cross-functional participation from sales, leadership, HR, IT, operations, analytics, administration, all kinds of different functions, so that we could get everyone's perspective on what they needed, where they foresaw problems and opportunities that we needed to go work on before we got through the small pilot. We also checked out our access methods, so everything from residential ISPs to public Wi-Fi to mobile hotspots to dedicated connections. And so we wanted to make sure that we really had in that first handful of users how to get through the process, so that then as we went to the team testing mode, which was literally the third day of the process, that we would have one full sales development team using both different, two different VPN connectivity options. They could test the core application performance, as well as make sure that the telephony, the cloud-based IP telephony solution that we use would support the number of inbound and outbound calls, as well as our ability to measure the number of dials, the amount of talk time, and then it would be integrated into the CRM solution so we could capture leads and opportunities and disposition those things, as well as do quotes and continue to conduct the business just like we were in the office. We also had to update a number of dashboards, so we looked across the 3 or 4 basic sales teams to figure out what kind of dashboards we were going to have to modify with people not connecting directly from their desk in the office, so that we could continue to measure and manage performance, and of course give us an ability to do a productivity check to see how big of a hit to productivity we were taking to what we expected from a normal day, a normal 8-hour shift across an employee group. So that really led us to remote monitoring and management of employees, which was going to be the next big piece of the puzzle to try to solve for. So by allowing the first full sales development team to work from home for about a half a day, it gave us a good view into the dashboards and snapshots so that we could see as calls connected, as talk time racked up, as the things that we looked for in each of our departments as their KPI functions, that we could see those real time on a dashboard from a manager's perspective. And so the manager sitting there in the office, the employees sitting outside the building from their homes, or we had a couple that one worked from a coffee shop and one worked from a public Wi-Fi in their building, and several had direct connections in their home offices or just in their apartments. Then we also looked at the video quality settings. We were doing a lot of Zoom conversations and conferences already. We were fortunate enough to have already rolled out Zoom, I don't know, almost a year ago, but we still had a number of people that used Skype because they weren't on the sales team, they were on the administrative side, so we only implemented Zoom for sales users. And then we had some who had converted and upgraded already from Skype to Teams as part of an IT pilot that was underway. And so in order to make sure that all that worked, we went ahead and created a daily kickoff huddle with the video on for each one of our teams, so that we could then talk to everybody on the team in groups of usually 6 to 15 people-ish, to make sure that we were getting the kind of feedback that we needed near real time from everybody to start the day, so that we would know what to continue to work on. And then that carried through into the daily operations once we got everybody home. So finally, we went to the last. Yes.
Hey, Jim, quick question. When you began this team test, did you basically set aside the whole team and tell them, okay, tomorrow everybody is going to work from home and we're going to, test the system and test our processes? Or did you do like a phased approach where a percentage of your team would run the test?
So honestly, we used the surprise test method. So no one knew who the first team that was going to go. Everybody knew we were working on this. We'd had a lot of conversations about it around the office, but nobody was really sure who the first team was going to be. So we literally picked a team and said, hey, you're going to go home this afternoon. This was late one afternoon. We prepped them for about an hour. They spent about an hour getting their equipment ready. We had everybody disinfect everything before it left the building. It went straight from the disinfection station to their cars and then to their homes. And then they literally logged on at 8 o'clock the next morning, or 8 o'clock local time. And remember, we're covering 5 time zones. So the first group logged on at, I think it was 5:30 local time. And so that was the first team test. that came up, and then the following day we did the second team, sent the second team home in the morning as we were watching the results of the test, watching and again sort of doubling up on the ramp and load phase here. So we started watching the load build and then said, okay, let's send another team home in the afternoon of that day. So now we had two teams working out and gave us an opportunity to build slowly, continue to test, look at multiple functions, and we had one sales development team, which is predominantly an outbound calling motion, and then the second group was an inside sales team that is about an even blend of inbound and outbound. So that gave us a good idea for how well the phone system was going to perform, how the network was performing inside, any other application issues, routing issues, some of those things, and then of course, continued ramping up of the IT support if we had any problems, as well as the overall manageability of the team. So that took us into security policy enforcement. We had some issues around applications that we could use, or that we reminded everybody about acceptable and appropriate use of company technology. So that was important to review those things. We also had wage and hour considerations that we had to make sure of. The folks in Oregon are non-exempt employees, so they needed to make sure that we had that taken care of and everybody understood how to do that from home. And then we also had to figure out how to communicate without micromanaging everybody. And so we came up with some different approaches there. So really that led us, just to kind of back that up with a timeline as I wrap up here, we looked at, we started on March 9th with that first team call to assemble all the cross-functional folks and explain the challenge and the time available to solve the problem, and then really rolled through the 10th through the 12th with the identification of, any departmental roadblocks or problems, then that first pilot, then the team test, and then, of course, Friday the 13th, we go out for a team test. It could have been, more apropos at that point, given how little time we had to work with this. And then on Monday, March 16th, so over the weekend, we went to the ramp and load, and then on March 17th at 8 o'clock local time in the morning, everybody was full-scale, virtualized, everyone with everything. So that really is the sort of the process that we used. And, Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you. I think that's, where we ended up on things and the time frame and the considerations that we had. And, we'll probably fill in the gaps here when we get to Q&A.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. And yes, there is a question from the audience related to the user experience insight, sometimes referred to as CAPE sensor. But let's cover that in the Q&A session, because I think actually we can speak to that from both perspectives, yours and Chris's. So now I'd like to introduce you to Chris Hilsenbeck. And Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. So I'm Chris Hilsenbeck. I lead the IT innovation program at Aruba on the Aruba digital workplace team. Our team runs IT internally, all the way from the help desk to network operations, and also collaboration with third parties on advanced solutions internally for our business. This is kind of in the IoT space, smart spaces categories. So we do a lot of work. A lot of it's the fundamental nuts and bolts of IT. Some of it is innovation and kind of forward thinking. And from our team's viewpoint, we had kind of 3 distinct periods of focus during the coronavirus events. And I'll break those down into phases and explain how our team has been able to respond to this. So the first phase was really trying to prepare, right? We had a lot of groundwork we needed to make sure that we had our bases covered. And we started with our global ISP capacity. Generally with our workforce, and Aruba has a large distributed workforce, we'll have about 40 to 80% of our employees during a workday on the corporate network. So we did some quick math to determine what happens if we have 100% of our workforce remotely accessing our network entry points, our POPs. Jim, I think, mentioned the ramp and load testing he did with his sales organization. So we basically had to go figure out, once that ramp and load happens, things like what happens to that voice traffic when we start dumping all that voice traffic on our corporate VPN entry points. Are we prepared? And we realized that we needed to quickly kind of bolster some of our circuits around the world. And then in order to get connectivity quickly into people's homes, we had a few different tools we could choose from to enable that. The RAP is a kind of a purpose-built Aruba device. It stands for Remote Access Point. And that is basically a standalone dedicated device that will create a secure tunnel back to your corporate network and also broadcast your corp SSID, and you can do things like plug a phone into it. So it's a huge enabler for getting people off the ground. I have one on my desk now, and it's been really great in terms of just easy, simple corporate network setup at home. And then the other tool that we use pretty heavily is Aruba's VIA application, which is our VPN software. This is a piece of software that can sit on the client device and create a secure IPsec tunnel back to our corporate network, and do things like push out a policy and provide that secure, dedicated access back to your corporate network resources that are maybe on-prem or may not be cloud-based. And kind of the third part here is we looked at our support tools that our help desk team uses, right? In terms of supporting a team like Jim's team, we had to quickly virtualize our entire global IT help desk. And so that was an exercise in, are we using the right tools? Are we collaborating, effectively? How do we do things like staff rotations and shifts? And do we have the right, prioritization built in? Do we need a mobile number that people can call if they have an emergency need for support from the IT help desk? So we did some analysis there. We made a few tweaks. Luckily, we didn't need to modify we didn't need to overhaul a huge part of that. We were pretty well positioned, but we definitely did need to make some tweaks to make sure that the team was enabled and effective, and things like circuit orders had gone through so that we were well prepared. And then phase two, after about a week and a half went by, we realized, okay, the team's in good shape. We are supporting the business. Now, is there anything interesting that we can do with the data and the information that we're collecting in order to give this information back to our business leadership, right? It's been a big exercise in the unknowns. Our team's working effectively, our team's partnering together. We have a lot of data collectors in terms of our network, fabric in each one of our offices. So we use tools like ALE. This is an example of one of the tools that we use. But this is a screenshot of Aruba's location engine. And this is a way that we can use data to drive decision making. Are people using collaboration tools effectively, pre-coronavirus and now currently? How are our VPN and tunnels working and our circuits performing? How is our help desk operations team able to handle things like triaging tickets, responding remotely, and handling things like onboarding new employees, which we have not really stopped, right? We're continuing to bring in new people to the business. So making sure that we're effective in getting our internal operations work done, as well as doing things like measuring people in the building, pre-coronavirus and now, and then with an eye towards the future, what are these numbers going to look like when people start to come back into the office? So we're building these really interesting, data sets to look at internally, and we can start to do predictive, analytics on getting the business back, to a point where we can get back to the office.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Chris, Patrick. Hey, this is good data, and I remember when we were first talking about this, I find it interesting, showing the ratio of Aruba visitors to employees on that pie chart on the left versus the pie chart on the right. And that, makes total sense. Obviously, visitors going to go way down, employees are be working from home, and so that ratio is going to go way up.
Yep.
But I also found it interesting, and I know we don't have the graphic for this, but I know you showed me a graphic at one point that showed Zoom traffic, because a lot of our employees, myself included, we use Zoom to do our conference calls, and to see that, traffic that just go total hockey stick within, a week, it makes a lot of sense given that we all had to work from home, but the data that you're collecting is, proof point of that change, but also it's data that you'll be able to use in your planning purposes, and hopefully those in the audience, you're looking at data that you can collect on these types of things to help you with your planning.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we do prefer technology that that gives us the ability to get in there and get these data insights. And you mentioned Zoom. Zoom is one of those technology partners that we're able to really look at that information across all the way from sort of session information to global daily Zoom call or webinar call information. And that is a really good indicator right now, because everyone is now working from home, and all these meetings that we had in the building in our physical spaces are now spread out across the world virtually. And so having that insight from a team leader perspective or a business leader perspective is really critical, right? So yeah, and we do, and just to call out a few other, I don't want to mention any specific vendors, but we do have a really great lobby reception technology vendor that we work with, a partner that we work with, that gives us insight into people that have checked in the lobby. And we also integrate this into our network stack, right, in ways that allow people to come into the office, sign an NDA in the lobby, and then do things like get access to the guest network in the office, so they can do something like screen sharing if they need to project to a display in the office space. So we're constantly evaluating ways that we can connect the network to the physical fabric in the building, and glue those together to create this really great employee experience. And then, so looking ahead, and this is really where we are now. We are in a spot now where we do not have a clear line of sight into getting people back to the office. Obviously, everyone's in a holding pattern, but the question we're asking ourselves now is, what does that look like, right? And so phase 3 is really looking ahead to the day that we can start shifting people back to the office. How do we bring our employees back safely? How do we get people to a spot where they can come back and be effective and feel secure in the office? So we're really planning this along 2 different tracks. The first track is using data to provide direction on the density in the office, right? And I just showed you the picture, the graph on Aruba's location engine. So how can we use that data to collect information on live traffic in the office and present that back to users in the building? So in other words, if the cafeteria was very heavily utilized, people can make a decision not to go there or to go to a less dense part of the building. And we're looking to present that information back to the employees in a real-time fashion. And then we're also looking at creating low-touch interfaces for our office. When people enter the office, they're presented with touch points, all the way from the lobby, where they're signing into that reception desk that I just mentioned, through to the elevator, through doors, and into conference rooms. So we're rethinking those touch points by using things like facial recognition, BLE technology, near field or NFC technology, and things like that we can use to limit the amount of touch points in the office. And but by providing these types of solutions, we can support our business groups. So when Jim's call center gets back to work in the office, they have a safe experience that's been optimized using that technology stack that we managed. I just want to mention, we do have really great blog posts on Aruba's Smart Spaces program, and it's also in the webinar in the attachments and links section, and you can visit blogs.arubanetworks.com for more information about our IoT Smart Spaces strategy.
Hey, Chris, just real quick on that. Yeah, thanks for calling that out, because you've collected a lot of great data to help you make the right decisions and informed decisions. But I'm glad that you were able to point to that asset in the attachments, because it helps to map out for the audience what sort of Aruba technology that you're using to help figure a lot of this stuff out. So thanks for doing it.
Yep, and I will mention, we have a really strong Smart Spaces program. We have a lot of technology partners, CBRE, JLL, Gensler, people that are industry leaders in this space that we work with to solve, to come up with solutions for Smart Spaces and IoT strategies. So back to you, Patrick.
All right, cool. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's get into our next polling question. And hopefully I can get, there we go, it'll work this time. So I'm going to turn this back over to Chris, because this is related to workforce planning and workplace planning. and let Chris kind of describe some of these elements here that you're voting on.
Yeah, that's great. So question, I'll take the CAPE sensor question. So have you used CAPE sensors in remote locations to monitor?
Hey, Chris, let's hold off and talk about that in the Q&A session. But if you could, do you see the polls, the polling question by chance in your view?
Yes.
We could just read it also, Patrick.
If you could read it. Yeah.
Okay, sure, no problem. So the polling question, and thanks everybody for starting to vote. In what ways do you anticipate your in-office workspace changing? Do you anticipate better sanitation of shared resources? Do you anticipate that the ratio of people that work from home is going to increase? Do you anticipate the fact that you're going to have to rethink how your employees interact with various touch points throughout the building and the office? Or are you going to have to look at what we call employee densification considerations? And what that really means is, you know, how dense are your workspaces? How dense are your call centers? Are you going to have to apply social distancing in the workplace? Or, you know, are none of these applying?
Yeah.
And
that's a great,
you know, what's interesting.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I'm starting to see the results. Obviously, you know, 54% right now are saying, you know, the ratio of work from home is going to change. It's going to increase. That makes a lot of sense. I think that also applies to Aruba, even though we did have a decent percentage of people that were already working from home, at least part-time. But it's interesting to see, you know, rethinking the office physical touch points is pretty high, as well as sanitization. So all of those, you know, make really good sense, and you know, it's interesting to see how everybody is thinking about this. So thanks for voting. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move forward a little bit. Thanks again, Chris, for providing that those learnings, and we're gonna come back to Chris here in just a few minutes with some Q&A as well as what he considers his key considerations. So real quick on the solution side of things. Now, Anthony mentioned at the beginning of the call that Aruba has been hosting a number of business continuity webinars, some of which have already occurred. One is kind of an overview of business continuity, another one on healthcare, and another one on education. And all three of those are available on demand if you want to go ahead and select those. Today, we're covering virtual call centers and workplace planning. And then over the next 2 weeks, we're going to have one on retail as well as security. So make sure you keep your eye out for those. In terms of the types of solutions for dealing with call centers, it really is quite simple from Aruba. We have primarily two main options for the remote worker. One is called the Aruba RAP or Remote AP. And then the other is just using Aruba VIA or Virtual Internet Assistant. You know, both of these work generally the same, but one has a little bit more advantages over the other. If you go with the Aruba RAP version, first of all, it's an access point that is very easy to deploy. It has wired ports for connecting your laptops, your phones, your printers, and so forth. But the cool thing about it is it's configured to provide the user with the same SSID that they had when they were in the office. It essentially extends the enterprise network to the user's home office. It also automatically creates a secure tunnel back to corporate resources so that your home workers, your remote workers can get access to all the resources that they were used to using when they were in the office. Another cool feature is that you can connect the VoIP phone that they're using in the office to the access point, and then when customers call in, it rings all the way through to their VoIP phone. And when they make calls out, it's like they're calling from the office. So it just virtually mirrors the experience in the office. And then lastly, it allows you the ability to create a guest SSID so that family members can also use this access point, but not kind of step on the same traffic as the business. So that's the remote access point version. It connects to corporate resources either through a VPN concentrator or through a virtual gateway that runs in the cloud. On the other side of things, if you don't have the ability to provide employees with an RAP, they can still access everything using Aruba VIA. And in this case, everything is done through soft clients. The VIA creates that secure tunnel to corporate resources. They run some sort of soft phone capability, and everything is secured just like they're in the office. And so those are the two options that are probably the best options for any of you out there who are thinking of or are in the process of creating a virtual call center. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to just skim over this really quickly, but I did want to pass along that both of these options are super easy to set up, because obviously with a user in a remote office in their home, support can be a challenge. But in both cases, whether you're using the RAP or just allowing your users to run the VIA client, either way, they support zero-touch provisioning. They can be managed remotely using either our Airwave management solution or our cloud-native solution called Aruba Central. And then, as I mentioned, everything remains very secure. Okay, so those are the solutions that are probably the most ideal solutions for a virtual call center. And with that, I want to kind of turn back over to our guest speakers and get their thoughts on what they consider to be the top key considerations that all of you should look at when you're trying to deal with the same challenges they are. And the first one is on the virtual call center. So Jim, you want to walk us through what your thoughts are here?
Yeah, so I think for us, really the top three, and you can see them there, everybody can read. Obviously, we wanted everybody to be able to get home, get set up, get online, and for there not to be a ton of support required for the configuration and the connection. And then, of course, because we were quickly moving to a work-from-home model, we had to ensure that, A, it was secure, but B, it functioned well with the additional security included. And then finally, we really wanted to make sure that the impact on our capacity from a bandwidth or a SIP trunk or any of those types of things that we had that in mind as we watched the traffic start to build over the course of the 3 or 4 steps in the methodology to get this implemented. And we did have some issues that we had to deal with when we saw capacity negatively impacted and exceeded some thresholds that we had previously set up. So very much, I think those are probably the 3 big ones. There's a handful of others, things like nice to have already had pets in the office so that when, the UPS FedEx guy comes and the doorbell rings and everybody, the dogs go wild at home. It's like, yeah, that's no big deal. We're used to that. And we had some hiring and onboarding plans that we didn't want to delay, but we wanted to alter so that it was virtualized so we could video interview, video onboard, and then conduct, our weekly training schedules virtually as well. So, lots of things that all kind of tie together once you get set up, security, and capacity dealt with.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Circuit capacity planning. I think there are some number of network engineers on the webinar today. Circuits. Circuits take a long time to provision, to procure, to plan for. So the earlier the better in terms of upgrade planning. And then really the employee experience when we get back to the office. I did see that poll come through around sanitization of shared resources, rethinking the touch points and employee identification. And we are doing a lot of thinking and even POCing around that. How do we measure the frequently used areas in our building? Can we create a heat map of where people are in things like a coffee bar or an elevator? And then can we give that information back to the employees so that they can make an informed decision, if they'd like to stay clear of those areas or spread out? That's certainly the direction we're going, as well as just doing rate limiting for people to come back into the office. I do not plan 100% staffing, for quite a while. So those are the key considerations around the office experience. And then reducing the touch points. How do we take, I mentioned earlier, how do we take the check-in process, the sign-in process for our guests and create a touch-free experience there? How do we create a touch-free experience for our conference rooms? We have the ability to use, we rolled out a mobile application to Aruba employees that packs a lot of these features into it. So how do we leverage the mobile app to drive, a touch-free experience in the office is the direction of planning right now. And then certainly remote work staff, we do expect this trend to continue for, increased teleworker, people working remotely. And so finding new ways to support them, finding better ways to triage things like home internet and get visibility in there, potentially using something like a user experience insight sensor or CAPE sensor to do that makes a lot of sense. We've extended our network perimeter out now around the world globally to everyone's homes. How do we make it secure and reliable is a key consideration for us.
Hey, and this is probably a good time, Chris. You mentioned the CAPE sensor, and I know that's a question that came in from the audience. So I think, because we're going to move into Q&A at this point, so I thought, why don't we go ahead and take that question, and I'll start with a response, because some people in the audience may not understand what a CAPE sensor is, or its real name is actually User Experience Insight Sensor. So these sensors are sensors that you can mount in your environment where users are, whether they're working from home or, back in the traditional sense when they're working in the office. And essentially, all these things do all day long is connect to your network and run tests on the performance of your network and the performance of applications. And by doing so, every time they record analytics data and information that can then be used to monitor, how well is the user's experience, but also, are fantastic for troubleshooting, because you have the ability to go back in time and see what was the experience like for a given user in that particular location at that particular point in time. So it helps you to resolve issues much faster, but also ensures that the user's experience is as best as possible. And it certainly is an ideal fit for users who are working in their home and have some level of assurance that they need to maintain in terms of responsiveness from the home office. And so I think it's a really good solution to use, and many people are looking at using those. But we didn't include it today because not everybody needs that level of critical monitoring, if you will. So hopefully that answers the question on the UXI sensor. Chris, did you have anything to add?
No, other than, Aruba Central cloud infrastructure is a really good way to manage a distributed workforce, right? And we're definitely leaning on Central as well to do things like device statistics for people's home devices. We can do some remedial, troubleshooting to make sure that network is performing well using Central as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and glad you added that, because Aruba Central, if you're not aware, is our cloud-based network management and operations solution. And just because the workers are working from home doesn't mean that Aruba Central can't continue to monitor and manage their network infrastructure and the devices, the RAPs that they're running at home. So, consider that if you haven't. There are interactive demos, if you've never seen Aruba Central, that are available from our website that you can play with. And so I encourage you to take a look at that when you have some time. So speaking of time, we have just a few minutes left. I know there's a couple questions that have come in, some of which we've answered already. But before we get to that, I just want to start real quickly with Chris, in terms of what were some of the things that that surprised you when you went about transitioning from your staff and your team, focused on being in office to all being remotely? What were some of the things that surprised you?
I think the number one surprise was really how quickly this evolved. It seemed like for a period there, every day brought a new, kind of bit of news that we had to react to. And in IT, you never want to just be fully reacting and responding, right? You want to be planning and building a strategy. So I think the big surprise for the team was how quickly our global team did have to leave the office, leave our tools and figure out how to get this done from home. and I think, like, we did a good job of responding. We were in a good spot in terms of the tools we're using and the way we communicate and collaborate. But that was the biggest surprise for sure.
Thanks. Jim, what about you? What surprised you?
So I think ours was slightly more basic. It's like bandwidth. Do you actually have bandwidth at home? Some folks were borrowing a cup of bandwidth from their neighbors, let's just say. So that was an issue that we had to work with. We did have an employee who literally put in an order with their chosen carrier and on a Thursday and had it installed on a Tuesday. I think that, and then the other, I think, positive surprise was how fast we moved across the interdepartmental conversations to make sure that we were getting the updates and dealing with those changes that Chris just talked about that got thrown at us literally hour by hour. So as we connected every 4 or 5 hours to review where we were, everybody was really thinking through the problem and really trying to anticipate what was coming. But we ended up dealing with lots of curveballs as we went through the 8 days.
And that was something that I was going to comment earlier on, the fact that you engaged cross-functionally with a lot of different teams, and everybody you created this virtual team to figure this out. And I've heard from some of our customers, that didn't necessarily take that approach and thought that they had everything, they understood the problem and that they had all the right people that they needed to take care of the problem, when in fact there were so many different perspectives and things that they had no knowledge of would be an issue that became issues because they weren't, kind of working as cross-functionally as it sounds like you guys did. So for everybody out there, I encourage you, if you haven't started this, and I would be surprised if you haven't, but as you move forward, think about, pulling the right people in and at least having a conversation with them about the various technologies and human impact of making this change. Jim, back to you real quick. What advice would you have for the audience?
So, I think the best way to look at that is if I had a do-over, what would I change? I would do this when we didn't need to do it rather than, stick ourselves in a pressure cooker to try to accomplish this. And I think that really, it either brings out the best or the worst in people when you get under that kind of pressure. Gratefully to our team, I'm thankful every day for the fantastic group of people I get to work with because they really responded well. So it would have been a heck of a lot easier to do this, under, I think, a much more leisurely time frame. And we probably would have gotten a very similar result. And then I think the last, piece of that is we're going to put this experience back into the business continuity planning exercise so that we've really looked through, what happens if we have, a natural disaster or, some other business interruption beyond something that gave us, 8 days to think through it and respond to it. What happens if that same time frame is, almost immediate? So we'll
Sure.
include that back in the business continuity planning loop for next time around as well.
Great. That's great advice. Hey, I know we're at the almost at the top of the hour. So Anthony, I want to turn it back over to you. And thanks for inviting us on the call today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. We did have a couple questions come in right at the end that were a little more on the technical side. One was about a lost or stolen wrap and how to prevent an unauthorized network access via that lost product. Also one about virtual controller as a VPNC on-prem. And then there was another question about, I don't know if this is a typo, but web RTC-based software for remote employees that need to be seen as PBX internal numbers. We'll follow up with you directly using the email address that you used to register for the webinar. Once again, this was the 4th in our weekly Stay Connected webinar series on business continuity. If you want to see what's coming up or maybe ones you missed on demand, go to the arubanetworks.com homepage, scroll to the bottom, click the webinars link, and you'll get right to the page that has that information. Also, you'll be asked to give some feedback after this webinar. Please rate us, let us know what you felt, and we'll try and make adjustments based on that. Want to thank Patrick, Jim, and Chris, and thank you for attending. Like I said, there's many webinars out there, and we appreciate you spending your time with us today. So that's going to conclude today's webinar, and until next time, have a great day.